on Monday pleaded guilty to murdering 3 young girls at a Taylor Swift-themed dance event last July. It was a shocking crime that triggered days of rioting across the...
Axel Rudakabana pleads guilty to the stabbing attack at a Taylor Swift-themed event. Nearly 6 months after 3 children were killed during a Taylor Swift-themed children's day,
including possession of a kitchen knife with a curved blade. The most serious, the murders of B.B. King, Elsie Stankham and Elise Aguirre.
3 young girls murdered in Southport. A community in grief. And how did our government respond? By turning against the very people expressing their outrage. But now the official police report has confirmed what we've been saying all along. Meanwhile, as Starmer's government focused on criminalising speech, Peter Lynch faced prosecution for expressing his views. He's no longer with us. This is the real human cost of a state more concerned with controlling what you say than protecting your family. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favour. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. What if I told you that everything you've been told about the Southport protests was deliberately manipulated to serve a political agenda? The official police report on the Southport protests has finally been released, and its findings directly contradict what the government and mainstream media have been telling us for months. After 3 young girls were brutally murdered, local residents gathered to express their genuine outrage and grief. It was a community in pain, mourning innocent lives lost to senseless violence. Yet within hours, politicians and media outlets had branded these citizens as far-right extremists. Without a shred of evidence, Keir Starmer's government didn't waste a minute before condemning entire communities as dangerous radicals. Now the truth emerges. The police report explicitly states there was no conclusive evidence that the protests were coordinated by extremist groups. Most participants were simply local residents, expressing grief and anger, exactly as we suspected. Furthermore, the report confirms that the violence that occurred was mainly unrelated to ideology or political views. A direct contradiction to the narrative Starmer's government has pushed for months. Why manufacture this crisis? The answer is control. By painting legitimate public concerns as dangerous extremism, the government created the perfect justification for imposing new speech restrictions. They transformed grieving citizens into threats that needed to be monitored, censored, and potentially prosecuted.
18-year-old Axel Rudakabana surprised the courtroom by changing his pleas to guilty. He admitted murdering 6-year-old B.B. King.
Axel, who also stabbed 8 other children and 2 adults at the dance studio on July 29th, pleaded guilty to all charges.
Seen in the recent disorder. The police, she said, doubted that would ease public tension, and the youth justice team wanted to keep his anonymity for his own welfare.
Meanwhile, as the media obsessed over demonising protesters, they conveniently ignored the most critical fact. Axel Rudakabana, the man responsible for murdering those 3 innocent girls, shouldn't have been in the country at all. Our broken immigration system failed those children, but rather than address this catastrophic failure, the government redirected public anger toward the very people demanding accountability. The consequences of this deliberate mischaracterization went far beyond simple misinformation. It created the perfect environment for tragedy. By establishing the precedent that certain opinions were not just wrong, but criminal, the government set a dangerous new standard for how it would respond to dissent. The government lie about who was behind the Southport riots wasn't just misleading, it was the foundation for a broader attack on free speech that would have deadly consequences. This false narrative set the stage for tragedy, as the government shifted focus from protecting citizens to policing their speech. Instead of addressing the failures that allowed a killer to target children, Starmer's government dedicated its resources to monitoring and punishing the speech of ordinary Britons. And as we're about to see, the price of this approach wasn't just measured in freedom lost, but in lives destroyed. While Starmer's government was busy crafting their false narrative about Southport, real people became victims of an increasingly authoritarian approach to free expression.
Surely Keir Starmer has to take responsibility for the death of a grandfather who seemingly took his own life in prison. Peter Lynch, 61, allegedly took his own life in HMP Moorland in Doncaster. That's according to The Telegraph. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder. He called police scum. He apparently referred to asylum seekers as child killers and rapists. And he said that MPs, the media and some other groups were corrupt.
Peter Lynch was one of those people. An ordinary citizen who voiced concerns online about issues similar to those raised by the Southport protesters. A father of two with no criminal record, Lynch had posted comments questioning the government's handling of immigration policies in the wake of the tragic murders. Following the government's crackdown on hate speech after Southport, Lynch found himself facing prosecution under newly implemented laws. His comments, which would have been perfectly legal just months earlier, were now classified as criminal speech. The police arrived at his home at 5 a.m, confiscated his devices, and charged him with inciting racial hatred. His case wasn't exceptional, it was becoming the new normal. The psychological pressure of being criminalised for expressing views shared by millions crushed Lynch. As his case progressed through the legal system, he faced public humiliation. His name appeared in local newspapers. His employer suspended him. Former friends distanced themselves. His financial situation deteriorated rapidly, with legal fees mounting and no income. All this punishment not for any violent action, but for words typed in moments of frustration and grief. The same government that failed to protect 3 young girls in Southport now devoted massive resources to prosecuting citizens for their opinions about that very failure. Lynch's case wasn't handled by a single officer, but by a specialised hate speech unit with substantial funding and personnel. Resources that might have prevented the original tragedy had they been directed toward public safety rather than speech control. Lynch's prosecution wasn't an isolated incident. It represented part of a systematic effort to silence dissent through fear and legal persecution. The message was clear: criticise the government's policies, especially regarding immigration, and face destruction of your life as you know it. What happened next reveals the ultimate consequence of a state more concerned with controlling what you say than protecting your family. The shocking truth is that Peter Lynch took his own life, unable to bear the weight of being criminalised for expressing views that millions of others silently share. His suicide note expressed despair at being treated like a criminal in a country he no longer recognised. His death stands as a chilling warning of what happens when a government prioritises narrative control over public safety. Peter Lynch became the ultimate human cost of speech policing, a citizen sacrificed on the altar of political optics and authoritarian control. The connection between the Southport lie and Peter Lynch's death exposes a disturbing reality. Our political class will sacrifice citizens to maintain control of the narrative. They've created a system where expressing legitimate concerns carries the risk of prosecution, public humiliation, and financial ruin. Peter Lynch's story won't be the last if we continue this path. More innocent people will pay the ultimate price, while politicians like Starmer focus on policing your speech rather than protecting your safety. The question facing each of us isn't whether we can speak freely anymore, it's whether we're willing to accept the consequences of remaining silent as our basic liberties disappear.